It's Sunday afternoon. I'm on the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore. The boardwalk is raised about 6 feet above street level, running next to the street. On one of the corners in a busy section of town, where there are restaurants, motels, and such, a young woman starts to sing. Her words are hard to discern, but she attracts my attention and that of others. I am annoyed that she is stepping out of line by breaking an unspoken yet understood social code. She's not being quiet. She is not fitting in. I see her as arrogant and disrespectful. After finishing her song, she and her companion walk up the incline to the raised boardwalk section, where they can be better viewed by the large crowd forming. It's not possible to tell whether her companion is a man or a woman. Together, they launch into another song. Their performance is breathtaking, and in spite of my reluctance to grant them any recognition, I am drawn into watching. The music seems like a kind of bluegrass, and even though no one is playing any instrument, I can vividly hear guitars and banjos accompanying them. On the next number, the asexual-looking one takes out a strange instrument, something resembling a dulcimer, playing sparsely on it. The song is again enchanting and otherworldly, lifting me into an exalted state. The second performer takes off the hat she had been wearing, revealing that she is a woman. They go on with the performance, introducing more instruments, completely winning the crowd and me, stirring us with the transcendent, effervescent beauty of their song. Then, the second woman talks to the crowd. She tells us that her partner, the one who first attracted our attention by singing on the corner, is to be executed in 2 days by the judicial system for a crime she has committed, and that she has been allowed out of jail for this performance as a special last favor. We are further told that the performance has been her way of saying goodbye and giving back. As I look again at the first woman, I see her in this new perspective. I now understand her radiance, her abandon, and the power she has had over us. She is positively glowing with peace and love. There's no doubt that she has accepted her impending death and has been empowered by it. The light surrounding her has affected us all, lifting us to the higher vibration. I have seen this kind of experience portrayed in films or books, where the hero bravely faces annihilation. But to see it here in front of me, for real, is completely moving. Her power is overwhelming. I stand watching, absolutely transfixed.
The acquisition of things becomes first and foremost for a lot of people. I mean, instead of making spiritual headway and making spiritual milestones, maybe my goal is to get a new Mercedes, or maybe it's to get some outer thing in our lives, and then after a time that thing doesn't mean very much to us anymore. Every time they make another $100,000, it's just empty.
What's usually happening there, just to bring that into perspective within my own particular take on things, is that when we're driven after materialistic goals, usually there's an emotional component to it. For example, we could be driven by fear. The sense of lack on a survival center is what compels many of us in this endless chase after material goods. Or looking at what we call power center needs, the need for significance, recognition, drives us to attain and to get that recognition. But what we experience is that even though we attain the goals, let's say we get the money on the survival level, or we get the recognition on the significance level, what we find is that on the emotional plane, those negative feelings that were compelling us still do not go away. We still feel the insecurity, the sense of lack. We still feel the sense of insignificance, even though we've attained what we think we need to satisfy those feelings. Actually, we're sort of engaged in a spiritual quest or an emotional quest, but we're trying to satisfy it on the material level. One of the principles of this whole orientation to processing is to understand that we're wrapped up in a dualistic pattern in both of these examples that I've just given. For example, what we're trying to do is avoid the negative experience by chasing after the positive. And we think that the positive will provide the antidote for the negative, but it never does. What we need to do is to confront and face those negative sides of ourselves directly, integrate, work with those sides directly, and then when we do that, we no longer have this compulsive need to chase after money or after relationships or after significance, because those negative feelings that were driving us compulsively have now been taken care of. So that's a very important beginning insight into what motivates us into all these different things and how we can start working on an inner level with those same emotional motivations, deal with them in an inner way instead of being driven by them, and achieve inner integration and peace. And then usually when we're at peace within ourselves and we're not driven, we often find that we get what we need. We're happy with what we have. We're in a relationship without being compulsive. We get the amount of significance, or we understand recognition in terms of contribution instead of recognition, instead of just ego gratification. So we take it to a higher level.
You know, in your book, and you start with an introduction about the art of loving yourself, you know, and really, and I found that significant because so many of us, you know, are in this world where you learn to make a living, but you don't learn how to live, and you don't know how to love yourself and accept yourself. You know, can you lay out for us what the ritual is of working on oneself?
The idea of loving yourself, that's a tremendously potent concept. Often we think loving ourselves just means being good to ourselves, being nice to ourselves. It's very easy to confuse loving yourself with just pampering yourself or just yielding to these ego needs, going after what you think you need. It can be an excuse for selfishness, or it can be taken to, let's say, a pseudo-emotional level where we think that we have to generate these kind feelings about of ourselves. And we may even try to condition ourselves by, let's say, thinking loving thoughts, which is actually part of many spiritual traditions, but and may actually have a place in inner work. But if that's the only approach we have, if we just try to think loving thoughts about ourselves or other people, we're still not addressing the negative stuff that's within. To me, loving yourself is the same as accepting yourself. And accepting yourself, to me, is most relevant when it's taken to an emotional level. And accepting yourself on an emotional level means to finally say, it's okay that I'm angry. It's okay that I'm afraid. It's okay that I'm really sad. It's okay that I feel insignificant, that I have these sexual compulsions. It means accepting and opening to all these feelings that we usually and have been conditioned to just resist, turn away, escape from. The very act of opening to them and learning that that can be done safely, that it doesn't mean that you're opening yourself to misery. On the contrary, it means opening yourself to a tremendous experience of integration. And when I say integration, I mean contacting yourself coming into contact with yourself. And in psychology, we talk about the split-off parts of ourselves and how one of the goals is to bring these split-off parts back into integration in order to achieve a whole or holistic experience. And that's what it means. In order to become holistic, in order to become whole, we need to reclaim, to welcome back these, what we perceive as painful parts of ourselves, and doing it in such a way that makes it manageable and not overwhelming. And the interesting thing is that many of these parts of ourselves that we perceive as painful are painful only because of our mindset towards them. And it's actually the act of resistance, and resistance is often unconscious, but it's the act of resistance which creates most of the pain towards many of these feelings and situations. When we learn how to open to ourselves, our threshold of pain changes. We don't experience the same kind of pain, and we move into this experience of accepting ourselves. We have a concrete experience. It becomes something very tangible when you start accepting a feeling that you were previously rejecting about yourself or condemning yourself for.
And some people may not even realize that they're rejecting themselves. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And basically stuffing these feelings in a corner deep inside themselves.
Yeah. When we have no consciousness of the feeling, it's generally called repression. The feeling does not even come into consciousness, and it becomes pushed back automatically, where it becomes what we call part of the subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And if we become aware of a feeling and then we consciously avoid it, it's called suppression. It means that we're deliberately pushing back the feeling. But you're right. Most of us don't have the awareness of the extent to which we do this. And that's part of what starts coming into awareness as you start working with yourself along these lines. You start becoming aware of the amount of feeling that is really there and how you are treating yourself and mistreating yourself.
And this ego self comes, it is amazing how the devil comes always in the garbs of divine in order to do its job. So this ego invariably comes and tells you righteous stories. He said, I hate myself because I did not do this, and this thing right. Do you see how it gets to you? And this is what becomes a self-rejection. Complete opposite of that is self-acceptance that eventually becomes self-love. So self-love begins with self-acceptance. So what we want to really to understand in a very simple way, in a language that you also understand, the spiritual principle, say it in a very simple, everyday language, is that accept yourself. And in doing so, that is the foundation of all upholding yourself. And if you do not accept yourself, even in the name of goodness or for spiritual reasons, even if you are rejecting yourself for spiritual reasons, you will never be able to change your life for better. The foundation of all changes and all transformation is self-love. Not selfishness, but self-love is very different. Self-love means you are loving, all the activities that comes under loving yourself are first of all non-selfish, basically. They are always geared towards actualizing our higher potentials. That means there is always a intention behind every action is to realize our highest self. And everything that leads up to and towards our higher self is self-love. Selfishness leads completely in the opposite direction. It takes you further and further away from your true self. If you want to really develop the true self-esteem, which is the foundation of transformation, a real change in life can come only through self-love, self-acceptance. Because every perception that you have of what happens to you and around you is perceived by what you think about yourself, how you are feeling about yourself. And the moment you must have observed that when you don't feel good about yourself, all the good things that happen to you and around you is invariably interpreted as something negative. And once you interpret it as negative, you will cause all the negativity, even if it is not there. So everything that you perceive and experience is coming to you through whatever you think about yourself. The similar thing is about the world. Whatever you think about the world, that's the way the world will come to you. The same thing, it is said in yogic scriptures that the guru cannot give you any more than what you think he's capable of giving you. God cannot give you any more than what you think he's capable of giving you. And you cannot give yourself any more than what you think you are capable of giving yourself. And by repetition, we repeat certain things about ourselves, about if we continuously dwell upon our weaknesses, upon our fears, then whatever we fear, we begin to draw it closer, and we are creating that. So on a spiritual path, on a journey towards the self, self-realization, self-actualization, you are actually creating your own life, carving your own life. You are like a sculptor or a sculptress. You take a life and you sculpt it with your own mind, with your own thoughts, with your own ideas, opinions, beliefs, everything that you hold within you. You create a life for you. And that is so totally different than the next person. You may live with your loved one, maybe 10, 15 years, you may sleep together, but you never know that this next person whom you call your wife or a husband, what world they live in. You never know. We live in such a private world, and what we think we are seeing is never the same as what is.
Frank works for a construction company. He's assigned to a new job where he's supervising about 10 people. They're renovating an old house. At lunchtime, one of his workers, a woman, invites him to go out with her. She suggests that they go to her place, which is nearby, and that she drive him on her motorcycle. Intrigued, he agrees. Her bike is old and looks like no motorcycle that Frank has seen. It is large and clunky, painted dark flat gray, with a two-wheeled trailer attached behind for luggage. As they start to get on the bike, he wonders if her invitation has any sexual connotations. It will be intimate sitting on the saddle with her. She's wearing a dark short jacket and pleated skirt that she pulls up around her as she jumps on the seat and waits for him to get on behind. He does so, but is unable to figure out where to put his feet. He tries various places, and finally she directs him to what she thinks will be the best arrangement. They drive off. They soon arrive at her neighborhood. It is crowded and run down. There's an old elevated train track that runs over the busy main street. The track is in the process of being dismantled, so that part of the street is open to sunshine, but part remains shaded and dark under the ominous structure. Her house is just around the corner. It is large, old, dark, dilapidated, with other houses jammed right next to it. They go inside. There are people inside with whom it appears she shares the place. They are mostly old with gray hair. They wander apparently aimlessly from room to room, drinking alcohol straight from bottles, passing the bottles around. Dogs are everywhere. Most are rolling on their backs playfully, but somehow they add to the sense of chaos and distress that permeates the house. There's the faint smell of urine. Frank finds everything extremely seedy and repulsive. He wonders exactly who this woman is and why she associates with these people. She doesn't seem to be one of them from outward appearance. She's younger and works for a living, which it seems no one else here does. He questions if she is drawn to this lifestyle for some inner purpose. Is this what she will become? Is there something she has to work out? But he doesn't see what it could be. Continuing to feel completely uncomfortable, Frank walks with her through the house. They go from the hall into the kitchen, and from there they look through open French doors into the living room. Here, in the middle of the floor, is a large, bare mattress. On it are a man and woman, both naked. They are not in contact with each other, but seem to be in some sort of trance, either passed out or deep in thought, or some other process. They are lounging in haphazard positions on the mattress, arms, legs, and torsos askew, as if they had been dropped from above to fall as they might. The other people in the room seem to find nothing unusual about them, and continue to amble aimlessly around. A quiet, somber mood fills the room. Then another person, a man, clothed, lies on the center of the mattress on his front. The other two rearrange themselves so that they are on either side of him, a few feet away, parallel but lower than him, so that if he were to put his arms out at right angles to his body, his hands would be on top of their heads. They all lie still. It's some kind of ritual or exercise. Frank doesn't know what. As he keeps watching, he gets the impression that the man is performing some psychic act that is affecting the other two. That he's some kind of healer, therapist, shaman, or artist. But none of these labels seem exactly right. Frank begins to sense that something important is going on, and that these people understand why they are here, doing what they are doing. This further distresses him because he's been noticing that there's a sense of realness, honesty, and truth present that attracts him in spite of the sordidness of everything. Or, he thinks, is it because of the sordidness? He feels overwhelmed, intimidated, values shattered, out of his depth, suddenly aware that there are parts of himself that are undeveloped and immature that he must seek out. He realizes that it is time to return to the job. He looks around for the woman who brought him here, but does not see her. He goes outside to discover her motorcycle gone. This upsets him more. He does not know how he will get back. Then he realizes he can take a cab.